My vindictive sister humiliated me with a paternity joke, so I returned the favor at her gender reveal, and what I exposed left her marriage in ruins. I'm Elise, 35 years old, married to Nate, 38 years old for 15 years. We've got 2 kids, Max, 5 months old, and Ella, 3 years old. Up until now, life had been relatively peaceful, but Rachel decided to turn my dad's 70th birthday into her personal circus. To give you a little backstory on Rachel, she's the type of person who can't stand not being the center of attention. If someone else is in the spotlight, she'll do whatever it takes to shift it back to her. Growing up, she was always the loud one, the dramatic one, the funny one, except her humor usually came at someone else's expense. Somehow, she's managed to carry that energy into adulthood. So Dad's birthday was supposed to be this big happy celebration. Mom and I had been planning it for weeks, getting the food, decorations, and guest list just right. Rachel? She didn't help with a single thing. She didn't even please reply until the night before. Typical. The day of the party started off great. We had a mix of family and close friends there, and everyone was in a good mood. Max, my little chatterbox, was running around telling anyone who would listen about his latest science project. He's obsessed with volcanoes right now and spent like an hour explaining how he made a lava explosion at school. Even Dad, who usually isn't one for long conversations with kids, was totally entertained. Then, just as Dad was starting his speech to thank everyone for coming, Rachel waltzed in. And I mean, waltzed. She was an hour late, but instead of sneaking in quietly, she made a grand entrance. Heels clicking, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, and this dramatic scarf that looked like it belonged at a fashion show, not a backyard party. The whole vibe shifted. People stopped what they were doing to look at her, and Dad paused mid-sentence. Instead of apologizing for being late, she laughed and said, "Sorry I got caught up. You know how it is." No, Rachel, we don't. Once she was there, it felt like everything had to revolve around her. She started making comments about the decorations. Cute, but a little basic, don't you think? Critique the food. This salad could use more seasoning, and even made a joke about the music being something from the Stone Age. But the real drama started during dinner. Everyone was sitting around the table, enjoying the meal and chatting. Max, being his adorable self, continued telling everyone about this new book he's reading on dinosaurs. He was so animated and excited, and everyone was smiling and listening. Everyone except Rachel, of course. She was rolling her eyes and looking at her phone, clearly annoyed that the attention wasn't on her. And then she dropped the comment that ruined everything. Rachel leaned over to her husband, Jake, and said in this exaggerated whisper, but loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Isn't it funny how Max doesn't look like Nate? He kind of looks like Alex, doesn't he? Alex is my ex-boyfriend from college. We dated for a few years, but it ended ages ago. Nate knows about Alex, of course. It's not some big secret. But for Rachel to bring him up like that in front of everyone, it was so calculated." The table went silent. Nate froze, his fork hovering mid-air. I could feel my face getting hot, and I blurted out, "What's that supposed to mean?" Rachel shrugged, all fake innocence. "Oh, nothing. I was just joking. Don't be so serious." But the damage was done. Nate didn't say a word, he just stared at his plate, his jaw tight. My dad awkwardly tried to change the subject, and everyone else started murmuring to each other. Rachel, meanwhile, looked thrilled. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I couldn't even taste my food because I was so angry. Every time I glanced at Nate, he was quiet. His face blank, but I could tell he was stewing. And Rachel? She was laughing and chatting like nothing had happened. After dinner, I pulled her aside. "What is wrong with you?" I hissed. She looked at me like I was overreacting. "What? It was just a joke." "No, it wasn't," I snapped. "You know exactly what you were doing. Why would you say something like that in front of Nate, in front of everyone?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. If it's not true, why are you so defensive? You're acting like I accused you of something." "You basically did." I shot back. "You just implied my son might not be Nate's. Do you even understand how hurtful that is?" But she just smirked. "Relax, Elise. You're making a big deal out of nothing. At that point, I knew there was no getting through to her. Rachel doesn't apologize. She doesn't admit she's wrong. She just stirs up drama and watches the fallout like it's her personal reality show. Nate and I left the party early. I barely even said goodbye to Dad, which made me feel awful, but I couldn't stay another minute. I grabbed Max and Ella and we bolted. The car ride home was completely silent. I kept glancing at Nate hoping he'd say anything, but he just stared out the window. I felt like screaming. When we got home and put the kids to bed, I finally asked, "Do you believe her?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Of course not. But if it's so ridiculous, why not just take a paternity test and prove her wrong?" I stared at him, my heart sinking. "Are you serious? You think I need to prove something that's not even true?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I trust you, Elise, but Rachel's sneaky. What if nothing?" I snapped. "You're supposed to trust me, not her." We went to bed without resolving anything. I couldn't sleep. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like my world had shifted. Rachel had planted a seed of doubt and I could feel it growing. The next morning, I woke up hoping the tension from last night would magically disappear, but of course, it didn't. Nate had already gotten up and was in the kitchen with Max and Ella. The kids were chattering away about pancakes, but Nate was unusually quiet. It wasn't his usual still waking up quiet. It was that heavy, awkward silence that had been hanging around since Rachel's stupid comment at the party. I poured myself some coffee and tried to act normal, but it was hard to ignore the elephant in the room. Nate was playing along with Max and laughing at his little jokes, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. I knew he was still thinking about it. It was driving me crazy. I knew the truth. I had nothing to hide, but Rachel's words had done their damage. She planted this ridiculous idea in Nate's head and I couldn't figure out how to undo it. Later that day, after the kids went down for their naps, I finally brought it up. "So, are we going to talk about it?" I asked, trying to sound calm even though I felt anything but. Nate sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Talk about what?" he said, like he didn't know exactly what I was talking about. "You know what?" "Rachel's comment," I said. "You've been acting weird ever since." He leaned back on the couch, avoiding eye contact. "I told you, I trust you, Elise," he said after a long pause. "Do you?" I pressed. "Because it doesn't feel like it. You've barely said 2 words to me since last night." He finally looked at me and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "It's not that I don't trust you," he said, "but Rachel, she's always been sneaky. What if she knows something we don't?" That hit me like a slap in the face. "What are you even talking about?" I snapped. "Rachel doesn't know anything. She was just stirring up drama like she always does." Nate didn't respond right away. When he finally did, he said, "I just think if it's not true, then why not take a test and put this to rest?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Because I shouldn't have to prove anything to you," I said. "Max is your son, Nate. End of story. You either trust me or you don't." He didn't say anything and that silence was louder than any argument we could have had. The rest of the day was tense. We tried to keep things normal for the kids, but it was clear something was off. Max, being the observant little kid he is, even asked me at one point, "Mommy, are you mad at Daddy?" I told him I wasn't, but the truth was, I was furious. By the end of the weekend, the tension was unbearable. Nate was still stuck in his head. I hated it. Our marriage had always been solid, but Rachel's comment had shaken something loose and I didn't know how to fix it. The worst part was, I couldn't stop thinking about it either. Not because I believed there was any truth to what Rachel said, but because it felt so unfair. I hadn't done anything wrong and yet here I was stuck in this mess she created. It didn't help that Nate started acting distant. He wasn't outright accusing me of anything, but there was this weird tension between us that wouldn't go away. Every time we had a minor disagreement about what to make for dinner, or whether Max should watch another episode of his favorite show, it felt like there was this unspoken thing hanging over us. And then there was Rachel. She hadn't reached out since the party, which wasn't surprising. She probably thought she'd done her job and could sit back and watch the chaos unfold. That's the thing about Rachel. She loves to stir the pot, but she never sticks around to deal with the aftermath. My mom, on the other hand, called me the day after the party to check in. She'd noticed that we left early and wanted to make sure everything was okay. "We're fine," I lied, "just tired." Mom paused like she didn't quite believe me. "You know Rachel didn't mean anything by it, right?" she said. I almost laughed. "Didn't mean anything by it?" "Mom, she basically implied that Max isn't Nate's kid in front of the entire family." Mom sighed. "She was just joking, Elise. You know how Rachel is. She doesn't think before she speaks." "That's not an excuse," I said. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Well," Mom said after another long pause, "you know how she gets. She probably just felt left out. Everyone was doting on Max and she probably wanted some attention." I didn't have the energy to argue with her, so I just said, "Yeah, maybe," and ended the call. But inside, I was seething. Rachel didn't feel left out. She wasn't some innocent kid acting out for attention. She was a grown woman who deliberately tried to mess with my family, and she'd succeeded. The days that followed were tough. Nate and I weren't fighting outright, but there was this undercurrent of tension in everything we did. Every time I looked at him, I could tell he was still thinking about Rachel's comment, even if he wouldn't admit it. By the end of the week, I was at my breaking point. Something had to give, but I didn't know what. All I knew was that Rachel had planted a seed of doubt, and it was growing like a weed, threatening to choke everything Nate and I had built. I don't even know where to start with this part because honestly, it still feels surreal. I never thought my marriage would come to this. The idea of taking a paternity test for Max, my son, our son, felt like such a slap in the face, but the tension at home was getting worse and I didn't know what else to do. Nate wasn't outright accusing me of anything, but his behavior said it all. He started being distant, like emotionally checking out, and I hated it. It's not like he was cold or mean. He was still helping with the kids, still doing his usual routine, but there was this wall between us that I couldn't break down. And every time I tried to talk to him about it, it just made things worse. "I told you, I trust you," he kept saying. But actions speak louder than words, and his actions screamed the opposite. I caught him staring at Max more than usual, like he was looking for some proof in his face. At one point, I found him flipping through old photo albums, looking at pictures from when Max was a baby. "Do you think you'll find something in there that'll suddenly convince you he's your son?" I snapped one day. Nate looked up at me startled. "Elise, I'm just looking at photos." "Relax. Don't tell me to relax," I said, my voice shaking. "You've been weird ever since Rachel opened her big mouth, and it's not fair. Not to me and definitely not to Max." "I'm not saying it's fair," Nate said, "but it's not like I can just turn off my thoughts." Okay? That was his excuse every time that he couldn't help it. And maybe he couldn't, but it felt like he wasn't even trying. I was stuck in this nightmare where my husband, the man I'd trusted with my life for over a decade, was suddenly questioning my integrity. Meanwhile, Max was starting to pick up on the tension. He's a smart kid and he knows when something's off. He started asking more questions like, "Why does Daddy look so serious all the time?" Or, "Are you and Daddy mad at each other?" I'd always reassure him, but it broke my heart. This wasn't his problem to deal with. He deserved a happy, loving home, not whatever this mess was. The breaking point came one night after another argument. It wasn't even a big fight. It started with something stupid like what to eat for dinner, but it quickly spiraled into something bigger. "I don't know how much longer I can live like this," I said, finally throwing up my hands. "What do you want me to do?" Nate asked, his voice rising for the first time. "Just pretend Rachel never said anything? Pretend those doubts aren't there?" "Yes," I shouted. "That's exactly what I want you to do because those doubts are ridiculous and they're hurting our family." Nate shook his head. "You keep saying they're ridiculous, but if that's true, why not take the test? If it's all nonsense, what's the harm in proving it?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "The harm, Nate, is that you're making me prove something I shouldn't have to prove. Do you not understand how humiliating that is? How insulting?" He didn't answer. Just looked at me with that same conflicted expression I've been seeing for days. And that's when I realized he wasn't going to let this go. No matter how much I argued, no matter how many times I told him he was wrong, he wouldn't be satisfied until he had proof. The next morning, I made the decision. It wasn't about Nate anymore, it was about Max. I couldn't let this tension fester any longer, not when it was starting to affect our kids. If taking the stupid test would bring peace back to our home, then fine. I'd do it. When I told Nate, he seemed relieved, which honestly hurt more than anything. He didn't apologize, didn't say he changed his mind. He just nodded and said, "I think it's for the best." For the best, yeah, sure. The process itself was straightforward. We went to a clinic where they swabbed Max's cheek, then Nate's, then mine. Max thought it was some kind of fun science experiment, which made me feel even worse. He had no idea what was really going on, and I prayed he'd never find out. The wait for the results was excruciating. It was only a few days, but it felt like an eternity. Every time I looked at Nate, I felt this wave of anger and sadness. How did we get here? How did my marriage, my family come to this point? When the results finally came in, I was the one who opened the envelope. Nate sat across from me looking tense while I unfolded the paper with shaking hands, and there it was in black and white, a 99.9% match. Max was Nate's son, just like I'd always known. I handed the paper to Nate without a word. He read it, then looked up at me, his face full of guilt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Sorry?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're sorry?" "I shouldn't have doubted you," he said. "I let Rachel get in my head and I shouldn't have." I wanted to yell at him to tell him exactly how much he'd hurt me, but I couldn't. I was too tired. The fight had drained me completely, and all I could do was sit there in silence. Over the next few days, Nate tried to make it up to me. He apologized again and again, saying he'd never let Rachel's words get to him again, but the damage was done. I couldn't look at him the same way. Not yet. Meanwhile, my mom called to check in and I told her about the test. Her response? "Well, at least now Nate knows the truth." "The truth?" I snapped. "The truth hasn't changed, Mom. It was always the truth. The test didn't prove anything I didn't already know." Mom tried to backpedal, but it didn't matter. She didn't get it. No one did, except maybe me. Rachel had done what she set out to do. She'd planted doubt in Nate's mind, and that doubt had nearly torn us apart. And Rachel, she still hadn't reached out. Not a single call, not a single text, nothing. I was still stewing over everything that happened with the paternity test when I decided I couldn't just let Rachel walk away from this unscathed. She'd almost destroyed my marriage and our family's peace with her disgusting joke. And the fact that she hadn't even reached out to apologize made it clear she didn't care. So I did what any reasonable, slightly petty person would do. I started digging. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for at first. I just wanted to find something, anything that would show the world Rachel wasn't as perfect as she'd like to pretend. Rachel has always been the kind of person who loves social media. Her Instagram is filled with perfectly curated photos of her life. Fancy brunches, vacations, gym selfies, the works. But as I scrolled through her feed, something struck me as odd. For someone who spends so much time showing off, there were barely any photos of her and her husband, Jake. Curious, I checked out Jake's profile too. It was sparse, which wasn't surprising since he's more of a low-key guy, but even there something felt off. He hadn't posted anything about Rachel or their life together in months. It was like they were living completely separate lives online. That's when I started to think, if Rachel was hiding something, it wouldn't be on her public Instagram. She's not stupid. She knows how to keep up appearances. I decided to look further. I created a fake Facebook account, nothing too obvious, just enough to fly under the radar, and started poking around. Rachel had 2 Facebook profiles, which I found interesting. One was her main account, which she barely used anymore. The other was an older account she'd apparently abandoned. I sent a friend request to her older account and was shocked when she accepted it within a few hours. That's when things started to get interesting. The group she was in were the first red flag. I expected to see the usual stuff, mom groups, fitness communities, maybe some cooking tips, but no. Rachel was in a bunch of private groups that made my jaw drop. One group was literally dedicated to infidelity with posts like how to keep your side piece a secret and signs your husband is starting to suspect. I couldn't believe my eyes. Rachel was actively commenting in these groups, giving advice like, Always have a backup story, ladies, and use a different name on dating apps. Trust me, it works. It was sick.